Welcome to Spiritual Psychology, and I'm here today with Kehla G. She's a spiritual mindset and business coach, and we're going to dive into the gene keys. And thanks so much for coming, Kehla.
I'm so excited for this conversation, and thank you again for inviting me to come and chat with you. I'm really looking forward to this.
Well, I'm excited because I actually get a gene key reading. That's some of what we're going to do is look at my gene keys as a way for you to understand how gene keys can be helpful for you. It's a pretty complicated system. I've had a little bit of experience with it, and I want to learn more. So tell people what gene keys is.
Yeah, so the gene keys are a synthesis of the I Ching Chinese divination text, which is known as like the 64 streams of consciousness, and a combination of astrology. So what you do is you can look up your gene keys on the Gene Keys website, so genekeys.com, or if you use Genetic Matrix, if you're into human design, you can do that as well. And what it's going to do, you use your birth information, and it's going to show you a compilation, and we'll show you a picture in a minute as we dive into Renee's gene keys. It's going to show you a compilation of 3 different sequences. It's going to look like a bunch of spheres with lines connected to each other. There's 3 different sequences, and each of these sequences represent a different theme or experience that you have in your life. So the first sequence is known as the activation sequence. This represents the physical challenges that you experience in your life. The second sequence is red. This is the Venus sequence. This is all about love, unconditional love and relationships. And then the third sequence is the blue sequence, is known as the pearl sequence, and this is about prosperity. So when you use this as a tool in your life or business, it's really something that allows you to expand your consciousness and really be able to have evidence for why you experience things the way that you do. And it's a tool for you to activate yourself from the shadow experience of your gene keys to a higher expression so that you can really just be your most authentic self.
So I do a lot of shadow work. In fact, that's the core of my spiritual psychology work because it's the under-recognized or the unconscious or the subconscious or the unresolved things in our life that block us. And they're often the things that are happening unconsciously that we're like, why does this keep happening? And it seems like it's outside, but it's actually inside. So the shadow expressions of ourself are, I like the term underdeveloped. They're just the less mature or underdeveloped parts of ourselves. And that's one of the things I love about Gene Keys is, my son was into Pokemon and Pokemon evolve, right? They have like their little first thing that they start is like a mushroom and then they become this like super mushroom, right? And so we all have their capacity to move from being a little mushroom into being a super mushroom. And Gene Keys can be one of the maps, I think, to be able to be a super mushroom.
Oh my gosh. I love that you use that metaphor because I'm a 90s baby and I was into the Pokemon. Like that was
Cool.
my thing. So that was such a great example.
Yeah. What's your favorite Pokemon?
I think is it Pikachu? I actually had a
Pikachu, of course.
Pikachu. Yeah. I was the red one, the red dragon came to my mind. It's like Shala something, I can't remember, but the Pikachu one, I had a stuffed animal when I was a kid, so that was definitely my favorite.
I'm kind of a Squirtle fan. Or that fluffy horse, the little cute little, it was almost like a my favorite pony, one thing that would become anyway. So we'll talk about Pokemon in another YouTube, but now so I'm curious how you use Gene Keys in business to help people.
Yes, I love this question because the Gene Keys, if you go to the Gene Keys website and you go to the source, there's a beautiful Gene Keys book that I recommend. It's actually a Bible. It's not even a book. It's so thick. But when you get into the Gene Keys, it can be very elusive. It's like, oh, I can see how the shadow of dominance shows up or the shadow of turbulence. But then sometimes it's difficult for people to really ground it into like tangibility in life. And so I've taken this really unique perspective of how I bring it into business. And what that means is that I shared it earlier that we have the 3 different sequences that have different themes. So the activation sequence is really your physical challenges and your zones of genius. So when I take this and I work with entrepreneurs, I'm looking at, okay, these are the common challenges that you experience in your business, the energetic challenges. And when you alchemize this and when you do that shadow work to integrate this, it's going to turn into your 4 gifts of your zones of genius. And this can be used in how you create content. It can be used in how you target your ideal client or your niche. It can be used in how you create a signature program. So that's just an example of like, I love to take these words, the frequencies that we have, because every gene key, there's 64 different gene keys, has 3 different frequencies. So there's a shadow gift in the city. So it's like, how do you take those 3 frequencies and deeply integrate it into your business, right? So that's just one example with the activation sequence, but I wanted to kind of paint a small picture of what that looks like in terms of tangibility.
So it's the idea, and again, this is what I work with people, is to do what we're good at, to use our gifts to optimize what's natural about ourselves. And I mean, there may be other places we need to develop as well, but to really focus on the things and have clarity about the things that we're good at or that is strongly already developed in us and how to bring them into their highest expression, I think, in these
Yes.
in business, right? So this is exciting for me, just where I'm at in my own business. So where do we go? Can we look at some gene key stuff and give people some visuals about what that looks like?
Yes. So what we are looking at here are Renee's gene keys, and I've specifically targeted the activation sequence. So we're going to dive into this first so that we can really see an example. As I've already kind of started talking about the activation sequence and this being your zones of genius. And I love how, Renee, you're so aware of what it is that you bring to the table with your clients. So I feel like this will be an opportunity for you to be like, yes, these are my zones of genius, and to see it play out. So as I mentioned before, we have the 3 different sequences. Right now, what you're looking at, the green is your activation sequence. Again, I'll go into more depth, but this is like your foundation to how you create physical stability in the body. And I also like to look at how this brings physical stability into how you run your business and how you show up in your business.
Mhm.
So your life's work and your evolution, this is your conscious sun and your conscious earth. So again, I mentioned earlier that we have astrology coming into this, and then we have your radiance and your purpose, which is your unconscious sun and your unconscious earth. So your life's work is really the main energetic theme that you experience in terms of what you bring to the table. Like, it can really show up through your brand and how you evoke people and how you really make an impression on them. It's also like the common challenge that you can experience, in your life and in your business. So having the 51.4, like I mentioned earlier, every gene key has a shadow, gift, and city. So the shadow is obviously the lower frequency. The gift is the like elevating that shadow aspect, and the city is like the highest expression. We also have what we call line expressions with the gene key. So after the gene key, you'll see a period and then a line expression. So the line expression is like the lens, the color of the lenses that you're wearing as you see and experience that gene key in your life. So for example, the 51, and I'm curious, so this will be like a little mini reading here, Renee. The 51, especially, I know bringing a little bit of human design here, but this is known as the gate of shock. And it's really about, you see the gift of initiative. So the work that you do in the world is really about, the shadow of agitation is like finding the people or supporting yourself and others in terms of like just feeling agitated, like something needs to change. There needs to be this initiative to evoke either, a shift in their purpose in life or the work that they're doing or their behaviors, their beliefs, whatever it is, into the highest expression of awakening. And the 4 line of server, what that means, the 4 line holds the energy of like networks, communities, friendships. And so it's like you really care about bringing an awakening to the communities and the people that you're connected with. So I'm curious, as a little mini reading of your life's work, how that shows up for you and if that resonates with you.
Oh, totally. I mean, that is my work. Is there a way for me to show myself here? Yes, there I am. So, yeah, it's absolutely my life work to help people awaken into their true self. I mean, it started with my own recovery from addiction and has moved into, I like to say, I did enough therapy. I eventually became a therapist. And so that is waking people up, helping people to evolve and be their best self in the world. That is my work for sure.
I love this. Okay, so now we're going to go through the pathway of challenge. So there's pathways that connect all of the gene keys, and it's like how those energies are connected and communicate with one another. So the conscious sun is connected to the conscious earth, and the sun energy is known in the traditional sense like the father archetype energy, and then the conscious earth is like the mother type and energy. It's like a very grounding energy. So the pathway of challenge is like there's this push and pull. So if you look at the shadow of agitation and then you look at the shadow of unease with the 57th gene key, you can see how there's going to be this push and pull, like similarities and flavors in terms of how those shadows interact. And so this is what grounds you. And it's like also, again, another gift. The gift of intuition is what you bring to the people that you work with. So the shadow of unease, intuition, and clarity is like really supporting people with trusting their intuition. And like, you know how when we question ourselves, we have this sense of unease. It's like, okay, I don't know, I need to find the answers, I need to look outside of myself, I need to go and ask this person this, I need to read this book, I need to do the certification, right? You're like constantly seeking what outside of ourselves. But the fact is that you cannot connect to your intuition outside of yourself because it is within you. And when we actually connect to our intuition, that's what brings forth the clarity, right? Clarity on whatever it is that we need. So again, with the fourth line here, that love and community. So you just confirmed that the 51, that awakening and that clarity, like that is the work that you do with your clients, right? And that love and community is like wanting to help the communities elevate their consciousness and be more connected to their intuition and stop giving their power away. So I'm curious how that shows up for you in your life or in your business and if that resonates.
Well, definitely in my work, if I just look at unease is why people come to me to do one-on-one or group work or mentorship. And all of spiritual psychology work being a blend of Buddhist philosophy and shamanism and Western psychology and mindfulness is about helping people to become connected with their own higher self, with the larger consciousness system, with the wisdom within themselves. I don't read other people. I teach them how to read themselves, right? And that's my intuition, is to help people to be able to remove the blocks to their own relationship with themselves and their own higher self. And then that's the clarity piece, right? Is to bring people into clarity of their authentic self in the world. In some ways, it's like what you do, but just in a completely different way, right? Helping people to become clear about what their purpose is, what their flow is, what their wu wei is in this lifetime, so that they can actually nourish and support that rather than spending time just always trying to navigate their dysfunction. Although the dysfunction and the unease is necessary for us to be able to wake up, that is the agitation that moves things forward. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I actually think just on that note, one of the things I really love about the gene keys, and I know that you're going to love this too, just with the shadow work that you do with yourself and your clients, is that it's not about getting rid of the shadows. Like your shadows are always going to be there, even if you're in a dark room and there's no light and you can't see your shadow. Like as soon as the lights are on, the shadow's there. Like it never leaves us, right? And the fact of the matter is, it's not about getting rid of the shadows. It's not like when you're agitated, you're like, oh shit, I need to like get rid of this agitation. I'm not supposed to be agitated. It's not about that. It's about looking at it like I call the shadows the points of resilience for people, where it's like I'm feeling agitation. This is telling me something, like getting really curious, right?
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
one of the really big things with the gene keys. And people are like, well, how do you do the gene keys? You don't do the gene keys. There's what we call the gene keys approach. And that is being gentle with yourself, being patient, being curious, being contemplative. Like there's nothing to figure out. It's very meditative, the way that you witness the gene keys show up in your life. And that's how you integrate it. Because there's not like you're just going to be like, oh, I've contemplated agitation, initiative, and awakening. That's a check mark on the 51st gene key. It always will show up as long as you're breathing in this physical lifetime. That's the theme that it will show up for you. And it's about loving it through that.
Thank you for that. I mean, that is my perpetual thing that I'm always saying, particularly to my mentorship clients, because there's a lot of perfectionism in Western society and this idea that we should be perfect or some other thing rather than we are just being human. And particularly for healers and therapists and the other people that I work with that are in helping professions, there's this idea that like, I'm supposed to be all better in order to be able to help you. And to know that we always have a shadow and that the shadow is the unseen parts of ourselves, and a lot of shadow is gifts that are unrecognized or underdeveloped. And so, right, rather than trying to get rid of it, it's actually about turning toward it and making room for the wisdom that comes through these other less rational or other ways that our intellect or our culture or our ego might not understand or even be comfortable with. Yeah.
Yes.
That's part of the agitation, right?
Yes. Oh, I love it. Okay, let's go. We're going to continue through the activation sequence here. So I mentioned earlier that your life's work and your evolution, that is like your conscious experience. And now the breakthrough, the pathway breakthrough is about having this breakthrough and accepting these challenges
That's over
with the
here.
agitation and the
Okay.
unease. Right. So the pathway breakthrough leads us into our our unconscious sun and earth. And that is really connected to our body. Okay. So the conscious is the mind, the unconscious is the body. So the
Mhm.
radiant sphere is specifically about what allows you to be radiant. When you have this acceptance of the challenges that you have in life, and it's not about condoning, the challenging things that you've had, but just allowing them to teach you something, allowing you to accept yourself as you are and what you've gone through and everything that you are and everything that you're not. That radiant sphere is, again, you shining your light. So when we look at the 54th gene key and the shadow of greed, aspiration, and ascension, it's really about looking at reaching into abundance and noticing that the shadow of greed implies that there's scarcity. There's not enough. Like, I need more for me. Me, right? And
Right.
so when we look at aspiration, again, aspiring is about expanding the mind. It's about like seeing things bigger, and that ascension is rising to that. Right. So the sixth line of nurture, what that means is like really nurturing yourself, nurturing others. And the sixth line also holds the energy of being a visionary, being on the roof and seeing what's next. Right. So when we look at that aspiration and ascension, I feel like it's again, it's so intuitive, along with the initiative and the awakening, and with the intuition and the clarity. So I'm curious how that resonates with you. Some people have an interesting relationship with the shadow of greed. So I'd love to hear your interpretation of that as well, Renee.
Oh, well, I mean, so I'm a recovering addict. I'm a recovering bulimic. I'm a recovering compulsive overeater. So greed doesn't show up for me with money, but it showed up for me with sex and with romantic relationships and with food and with drugs and alcohol, that there was never enough, right? Like I really I was a bottomless pit or a hungry ghost as an addict, right? So that for me has absolutely been my shadow. And like you said, it is through coming through spiritual experience, through the 12 steps, through all of the wonderful healing work that I've done, to be able to connect with the abundance of the universe, and rather than trying to source through others or through the physical plane, to really connect with the spiritual starvation that I had, and some of the emotional starvation too, and to be able to feed those other underfed aspects of myself. I didn't drink because I was thirsty, right? I drank because I was medicating myself. So there was never enough because I was treating the wrong thing, which is really what greed is. It's like, even with money, it's like people are looking for money. There's never enough, because what they're really looking for is security or power, or a sense of feeling good or loved or important or whatever it is. And money can only provide a certain amount of things. And so if you're looking for something to provide what it can't, then it opens up this dysfunction of never enough, which is what greed is in all of its different aspects. And I know a lot about that.
Oh my gosh, you nailed that sharing and that view, because I was so curious, because usually people, when I talk about the shadow of greed, they automatically go to money. But the way that you just so powerfully shared how it showed up for you in other ways, and even just like greed is essentially implying like the lack of safety and security. Like it's a lack of something, but it's just like there's never enough, right? So that aspiration and ascension, like you had to rise above the greed, and that greed showed you like, hey, this is not how you're meant to live. And like that's how you really start to take care of your body. Again, radiance and purpose has to do with the body, taking
Mhm.
care of the body and the mind so that you can create that stability within yourself, right?
Mhm.
Right. So
Nice.
beautiful. And then
Nice.
we look at, this is like, I love how this conversation is going, because just so that everyone knows, watching and listening to this, like I don't know Renee. Like I
Right.
don't
No,
know
we
her.
don't know each other at all. Right.
So when I'm going into her gene keys, and it's like I don't know anything about her, and I'm allowing her to resonate with it, and she's sharing, it's like this is how legitimate, this work shows up in our life, and it's just about being curious, right? So what I love about what you shared, we're in the body side, that unconscious side, the radiance and the purpose. The course, the pathway of core stability is about creating that stability within your body so that you can really tap into and express your purpose. And so what I love is how you shared the physical, emotional, spiritual struggles that you had with the shadow of greed in your radiance. And that allowed you to really take responsibility and create that stability within your body, so that now when we look at the 53rd.6 gene key in the
Yeah,
purpose sphere, we have the shadow of immaturity, expansion, and superabundance. And it's like, I love how you have already been talking about the theme of immaturity or things that are underdeveloped. And like, that's just naturally in your work, where it's like, I love to talk about immaturity from the lens of like, you have plenty of little seeds planted in your garden.
Yeah.
And it's not immaturity, like anything's missing. It's just something needs time to grow. You cannot rush the process of planting flowers and vegetables in your garden. But because there's more maturity, because there's more seeds, that is the key to expansion. And then eventually, obviously, the superabundance is having a flourishing garden. So when we look at the 6th line, so again, the lines on the unconscious side with the radiance and the purpose, they have to do with the body. So the 6th line, nurture in your radiance, is like you nurturing your body, right? And then we look at the 6th line and the purpose, and that intent or cells is that the way that you do your work is impacting people on a cellular level. Like, how do we really shift yourself on a cellular level? The shadow aspects that are creating those seedlings of immaturity that need to grow. How do you take care of yourself on that level so that you can expand yourself and your awareness and your purpose and whatever it is you do with your career, your relationships, your kids, money, and so on. So that's really like, when we embody the energy of our purpose, it is because we've created that stability within our radiance, right? And then we've accepted the challenges from our evolution and our life's work. So that's really how the activation sequence is here to physically activate you in your life. And I love that we've done this reading now, and you've shared about your business, you've shared about your life, and how this has literally become your zones of genius and how you support your clients through the work that you do. So I'd love to hear your insights on the 53rd in your purpose.
Well, I just love having different language and different lenses on the same thing. So for me, the truth is the truth is the truth, and there's many paths up the mountain. And this is really exciting because this idea of immaturity, expansion, and super abundance, and talking about like the underdeveloped seedlings that people have within themselves. So one of the main pieces of work that I do, in fact, I just did a free live on Insight Timer yesterday on transforming trauma. I have healing trauma courses, and the way that I hold trauma and really all unresolved emotional issues is that it's aspects of ourself that got frozen in historic or psychological time and weren't able to process, digest, or receive the nourishment they need to move through to be able to grow and evolve. And it happens to all of us. It's part of what happens here. And soul retrieval work, which is the shamanic terminology for what's called inner child work. And there's a really powerful modality called internal family systems that a lot of people are aware of now. It's all very similar work. This is the cutting technologies of human healing, and working directly with these little sapling parts of ourselves, or these little seed parts of ourselves that for one reason or another, whether they got frightened away by a trauma, or whether they were just not nourished in our culture or our family, or whether they were parts of ourselves that we didn't know how to navigate and we put them into our shadow. The work central to the spiritual psychology healing work is to go across historic and psychological time and bring those parts of ourselves out of those frozen places, again, in like the transpersonal spiritual realm, in our own psyches, and to bring them into present time where they can be loved and cared for in the way they've always needed. And once we reintegrate, this is the beauty of shadow work. Once we bring the light into the shadow, it's not shadow anymore. Once we shine the light on those seedlings, then they can start to grow, because a lot of seeds can live for years and years on a shelf. You got to put them in the soil, give them the right conditions, and there's a natural growth process. And the same is true for our psyche and our emotions, as is true in the physical world. So I love that you use those analogies. They're analogies I use in my work, and it's really comparable to the soul healing or cellular transformation that is my passion to bring to others and to the world. Yeah, it's really exciting. And it's I do it because it was done for me. I experienced this work. It changed my life. And now my passion is to bring what has healed and redirected my energy to other people. Yeah, very exciting. And that's the
Oh, that's so
superabundance
beautiful.
piece, right?
Yes. Yes, exactly. Oh, I love witnessing when I do a Gene Keys reading or session with someone and I don't know anything about them. I'm like, hey, this is my intuitive interpretation. Like this is what it means. And the analogies and the metaphors that I give and how they evoke the person. Like it's evoking you. Like, yes, like it's a mirror being held up to you. And what I really love about the Gene Keys though is that this is energetically imprinted on you like since birth. This is why I use this work with my clients in their business, is because when they're trying to figure out a niche and an ideal client and they're creating their signature program and they're looking at, okay, well, I have these, I've written a book or I've had these certifications, and they're looking at all these 3D credibility pieces, and I'm like, okay, but here's your energetic credibility and it's been here the entire time. And I think that's very unique. That's a very different approach to business rather than like the physical things that we do in this 3D world, because it's always
Right.
the energy that we bring to the table.
Right. I mean, we work in the similar realm, which is the melding of the two, right? I often call it the masculine and the feminine, or the intellect and the intuition, or the physical and the metaphysical, right? And for most of us in the Western world, we're really deeply rooted in the physical, in the masculine, in the rational, in the intellect. And it's an important aspect of who we are in the physical world, but there's all of this non-physical, energetic, emotional, that's actually our experience here. And that is the piece that's underdeveloped, under-recognized, under-matured, certainly culturally. And for most of us, even though we may have great abilities, we don't have wording, we don't give it credence. It's for me, actually, this is a different conversation. It's actually what institutional misogyny is about, if we look at it as masculine and feminine, that all of us, most of us, have a poor or underdeveloped relationship with the metaphysical within ourselves and externally, right? And so incorporating it and allowing it, again, it's part of the, whether it's probably like we have a seed and the light is the intellect, and then the water is the metaphysical or the feminine, right? And you need both of them for things to grow. And it's why I'm so excited to be in this sphere of healing and this cutting edge of all these technology, what I call psychological technologies that are coming right now. And it's beautiful. You're bringing that into business, right? And it's grounded. It's not, that's, the I Ching is thousands of years old. And it's like Vedic astrology in India. Like, intelligent people have been using these things. It's not necessarily woo-woo, read your horoscope in the Sunday Times. Like, it's actually, there's a grounding and a practical nature to the metaphysical that has been unrecognized, and being able to navigate it and use it is super exciting.
Totally. And one of the things with the Gene Keys that I don't get super into the science aspects, I could talk about it for hours, but the 64 Gene Keys, they have to do with, the codon rings, and it's connected to amino acids in the body. And it's like the 64 chromosomes, like it's actually genetically connected to you. Like Gene Keys means that it is connected on a cellular level to your body. So if you actually start to look at the I Ching and the 64 streams of consciousness and how it connects to the body, you can find that. So this isn't even just a metaphysical thing. It's actually a very physical thing. Like there's
Right.
science behind it, which is fascinating, right? So I just want to share that for the people who are watching and they're like, well, this is very woo-woo. It's like, well, actually, there's science. So we're not going to get into that rabbit hole today, but there is science that backs this up, which is really beautiful.
Well, that's the thing, though. We live in a holographic universe, right? So, and because of scientific rational materialism, we tend to break things up into segments. Like, in medicine, we look at the heart and we look at the lungs. But, if you take a heart and you take it out of a body, it's just a lump of meat. Like, it's not actually a thing, right? So the physical and the metaphysical are inseparable. They work as a unit. I think that some of the either or, that mentality that tends to be more rational, that is confusing, that it is always both and. That if it's true in the metaphysical, it's true in the physical. If it's true in the physical, it's true in the metaphysical, which is brilliant information, actually, when we can recognize that. And that's one of the keys to healing on all these different levels. Yeah.
Yes, this is so beautiful. I would love to. Do you want to dive into your pearl sequence?
Sure.
because I feel like our theme today is very much on being of service.
Yeah, that's the theme of my mentorship program is the path of service.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I love, so I'm going to talk about the Pearl sequence here. And the Pearl sequence is how you're designed to be of service. So the activation sequence, you talked about what physically activates you, your zone of genius, and you're going to see nuances coming into the other sequences as well, in terms of like, well, you're obviously of service in your activation sequence, but your Pearl sequences in terms of the prosperity that you create with how you connect with the people that you're destined to work with and the work that you do. So when we look at this, we have a combination of, you've got your sun planets, your Jupiter, your Mars planets in here. So all of that astrologically, if you're familiar with those planets, you'll be able to see those themes
Where
come
are
through.
they in this?
Yep. So we have the unconscious Mars, and then the conscious Jupiter, and the unconscious Jupiter, and then the conscious Sun.
Okay. And are those planets different for different people?
No. So
Okay.
this great question. So your gene keys are based on the planets. There's the Sun, the Earth, the Mars, Venus, and Jupiter. So they're either consciously or unconsciously defined throughout the sequences. So the unconscious side always has to do with like a more deep connection to the body, and the consciously defined planets are connected to the mind. So when we look at as we start the Pearl sequence, we have the vocation. So your vocation is like your deepest inner wounding, because it happens when you're within the womb of your mother, and it's like your biggest fear around being alone. But it's like when you alchemize that shadow into the gift in the city, that becomes one of your biggest talents in terms of how you support people. So the 60.3 in the vocation, we have limitation, realism, and justice. And it's like one of your biggest talents with people, and you can already hear this in your sharing, Renee, is like helping people break through the limitations and really create that experience of having like a realistic approach to their life and how they show up in their business and their relationship with themselves, and creating that justice, right? Like justice in the sense of like, you don't have to be limited. Your past trauma does not have to define how you operate in the present or in the future, right? And it's creating that realism so that you can break through that. So the third line of strategy and implementation, like the third line really has to do with how do you like strategically work through that? Like how do you implement the inner work so that you can move from being limited to, again, having that sense of liberation from your past? I'm curious how the 60.3 in your vocation, or if you've actually contemplated your Pearl sequence before we dove into it now.
I have not. So it's interesting because this just showed up with a client. One of the pieces of work that I do, and I'm teaching it right now in my mentorship program, is negative energy extraction, which from a Western psychology standpoint could be seen as our defensive structures, or the way that we orient towards power as a victim or as a hopeless person, or with rage and judgment. I mean, there's all these different ways that we defend ourselves or move through the world as a disempowered person. And so, and even being judgmental is disempowering, because you're actually trying to make yourself better than other people and in order to gain power yourself. So a lot of my work is to help people dissolve those old defensive structures so that they can open into, and this is the realism piece, is that there are really infinite resources for us. And so wherever we can plug into them, expanding our relationship, again, with the larger system that we're a part of, however we understand that, God or nature or business or, our community, and to be able to hold our own power that's actually authentically our power, and to grow and evolve into more mature expressions of ourselves, so that we're not in a victim mode. We're not always enraged at other people, taking everything personally. We're not always having to judge other people and thinking like we're better than them. And we can start to move into acceptance and love and fulfillment and joy, and more expressing outward and being helpful, rather than kind of being a sucking machine. And so, I had a client come to me this week who had a really terrible experience with psychedelics. And it's the shadow side of psychedelics, and it happens to a lot of sensitive people, is that they'll go into a psychedelic experience and they're tooling around the astral plane. And just like walking down a city street, there might be some people that are nice, and there's some people that'll steal your purse and act like they're your friend. And so she really picked up some negative energy and she couldn't get rid of it, right? And so that's a lot of my work. That's what negative energy extraction is. That's what really looking deeply at our defensive structures. Am I willing to let go of this old way of being, of defending and protecting myself? And actually, even being a victim is a way to defend yourself in a funny way, or to navigate power, how we manage power. And it was actually the first experience I've had in 25 years where I couldn't loosen this energy from this person. And it was really a potent experience for me as well, because I almost got sucked into it in the victim thing, because my mother was a victim, and it's a place that's very easy for me to feel like, oh, I need to do more to try to help this person. And really what it was is that they weren't able or willing to hold the power themselves. They need other people to do the work for them. And that's how they move through the world. And she went on for me and is now with other people, looking for other people to do the work for them. And she may find someone to do that. That's the mode that she's in. That's not how I work. And I believe in this place that we're at in our evolution, it's really, really helpful. The more we can take self-responsibility to step into, and I look at justice as this. You could look at justice as like the scales, right? And for me, the scales, this is expanding this idea of justice into this conversational nature of reality, of our own free will and universal will for us, of our own life force and how it works in with the larger force, like that balance of those things where there's not, God's not some like terrible ogre that's like, smiting me, or Santa Claus that's, if I'm good, then everything will be nice. Like it becomes much more of a co-creative experience and a more mature. That's for me how I would hold justice in this way. And I think actually even social justice is really about that. A lot of the way that social justice is held actually keeps people in victim roles. Just
Yes.
That's a whole other big conversation. But true justice is about empowerment and growth and expansion and being able to hold our own power in the world, which is what social justice wants. But a lot of times it's keeping people victimized.
Yes. That was such a powerful share, because what you were saying in terms of that radical responsibility, the self-responsibility. The other thing is too, is that when we're unwilling to give something up, it's because we're not willing to take full responsibility, right? We are avoiding something because the payoff for being right that we're a victim or that this isn't working is bigger than the payoff of like actually releasing and healing and letting it go, right? And everyone has their own journey and their own process going through that. So I really heard that in your sharing. But yeah, if anytime we're holding on to something, there's a payoff to holding on to that thing and being right about it, right? I mean,
there's
it's
a
like
flip, there's a flip way to understand it, which is that a lot of times what's familiar to us, because most of us are fear-based, and a lot of times what's familiar, even if it's excruciating, feels less scary than the unknown. And so people this is the benefit of pain and why I'm not averse to suffering anymore, because suffering has been my friend over and over again and made me willing to let go of things that I would not have been willing to let go of if it didn't hurt that much. That's relationships, that's ways of being in the world, that's ways of eating and drinking and drugging. Like until those things really caused me tremendous pain, that's the value of pain. Actually, that is the purpose of it, is to let us know something's out of alignment. And it's actually the danger, I think, of the societal medication of pain, rather than looking at the wisdom that it offers of what needs to be let go of or changed. That's the stepping into that radical responsibility.
Yes. And you know what? This leads us beautifully into your culture sphere. So we talked about the vocation, the realism, the justice. That pathway of initiative is really like looking at how do you initiate yourself into being of service, right? So, you talked about the work that you do with clients, that pathway into your culture sphere. Your culture sphere is specifically the like-minded souls that you are destined to connect with. And it's like the ambience in terms of how you connect with your people. So if you think of work culture, your culture sphere is the ambience that you create with the people that you work with. So I love that we have the shadow of control, authority, and velour, because you really spoke to how that control really ties into that limitation and that victimhood that we talked about. And it's like you're seeking to control, like even we talked about greed earlier, it's like, you know, you want to control like what you don't have into what you do have. And the gift of authority is realizing that we actually have more control than we give ourselves credit for, and that we don't need to add the additional manipulation or control or death grip on things to force things to happen. And that velour is like this confidence, this bravery, this sense of release and expansion, that you don't have to control everything, because the reality is we will never actually be able to control everything. So then it's a waste of time to be controlling everything, because you're not. And so that third line unit, what that means is that when you look at a cultural aspect, and again, coming back to specifically the people that you work with, you know, you'll probably notice that you work really well in groups of like 3 to 15 people, or being able to come in and work with certain groups of people to bring these people together in the work that you do. Like that's kind of the style of the culture that you bring to the women and, you know, the different entrepreneurs and spiritualites that you work with. So I'm curious how that the 21 with that shadow of control and that resonates with you.
Oh, well, you know, being a controlling bitch would probably be one of my big shadow characteristics. And I try to not do that. And I have, you know, for me, been, you know, continually almost for 2/3 of my life, deeply informed by the idea of surrendering to a power greater than myself. And and so I would really see that as the mature aspect of this, is moving out of my own fear-based limitations and into trusting. That's really always my growing edge, is trusting the universe, not necessarily trusting individual people, but trusting the universal flow, that the universe has my back, that this isn't a design flaw. And the more I can surrender into that, then the more that flow happens. And from a really specific standpoint, you know, I'm in a place of really creating platforms and programs and things right now. And one of the things that I really, really want to help create is small group connections for other people. And so I'm really, you know, that what you just described is something that's really on my mind in how to do that, because I think connection for me with other people, just in a vulnerable, authentic way where we're caring about each other, that village experience, that tribal experience that's necessary for all of us. I think we have more opportunity to do that now with like-minded people than ever before. With, you know, I mean, I'm connected with you, you're in BC, I'm, you know, here in New York, and we can connect with people all over the world. And how to, I really want to create structures for that kind of deep connection and support that we can offer each other, you know, across time and space in this moment right now. And I think that that small group of like 8 to 15 people is an optimal number for a lot of people. So you named it, and it's one of my hopes, and the universe is listening as we plant that little seedling into the metasphere.
Oh, I love it. This
Yeah.
is so fun. Oh, okay. So when we go from the culture sphere, so you'll see there's the pathway of growth and the pathway of service that come up to the brand, and they also come down. So there's a pathway of growth and service into the vocation and the culture. So if you think about, I mentioned earlier, so your brand is your life's work and your activation sequence. So they're connected, right? You're going to see them cross over here. And the line expression is different. We go from server to heart and feelings. And it's so beautiful, because I really feel like what you just shared when I was asking you about the culture sphere and just like getting the people connected and the possibilities that we have around, you know, being more connected, like through the heart with other people, with other like-minded souls, like that is part of your brand. Right. So that agitation of being disconnected, and like now we have tools like Zoom, where I'm in Canada and you're in the US, like across the continent, and we're having this beautiful conversation, right? So it's like part of your brand is really to connect with others and to connect with yourself. And there's a lot of heart in the work that you do. So the culture is like you're growing into your brand, but then your brand is growing into how you create your culture with the people that you work with. And then when you look at the pathway of service, like your vocation, like that core talent that you have in terms of breaking the limitations and helping people like smash their glass ceilings, like that is how you are of service to your brand. And that's how your brand is of service to you. So when we look at the pathway of quantum, going to the pearl, what I love about the pearl is that this is where we contemplate the pearls of wisdom. This is really how we tap into our version of prosperity. And it's not just money. It's like love, it's relationships, it's health, mental health, physical health, all of it. And so what I love about the 3.3 being here is that the third gene key, the shadow of chaos, like I always share the metaphor of children in a playroom. And there's like shit everywhere. Like there's toys all over the place. And let's say as an adult, you might walk in and be like, oh my God, this is chaos. But then you start to watch, right? You're witnessing and you're seeing these kids creating a fort out of couch cushions. And all of a sudden they've got this like beautiful valley of Lego and they've got a castle and there's dragons with this little toy that they have. And it's chaos, but they're being innovative. And there's an innocence within the chaos, even if people find that chaos feels like the devil or evil or overwhelming. It's like, no, there's actually an innocence when you're curious about it. And there can be a lot of trial and error in that, right? So the third line of celebration, and what I love is like through prosperity is like every experience that you have, every win that you have, every transformation shift that you have with the inner work that you're doing, with all the shadow work that you're doing, celebrate that. Celebrate the process because there's nowhere to really get to. Like I know you being somebody who's dealt with the addictions and the drugs and the binge eating and the greed that we talked about. Like when somebody is a recovering addict in any form, you have to celebrate every single step because the journey never stops, right? So that's really the energy that you bring. And what I love specifically, I was talking about the pathways of quantum recently. What I love that the Gene Keys talks about is that you can never predict a quantum leap. And so what I love about this is that it's implying that we are here to live in the present moment and to trust the process, and that it's in those moments that we create prosperity. And so how you experience prosperity is like navigating that chaos and innovation and innocence and celebrating the process. That is how you create prosperity. It's not about working harder. It's not about gaining more clients. It's not about making more money. It's very much being present and grounded in the moment. It's like these are like your biggest blessings to share with the world. So I kind of riffed into like a lot of the pathways in the pearl in this, but I'm really curious how that's showing up for you and hearing my interpretation of it.
Well, I was talking to my partner about this very thing this morning because it's so easy culturally, and nothing's by coincidence in my world or in anyone's world, actually, if you really get down to it. So, I'm moving from being a one-on-one therapist into being a content creator and a teacher. Excuse me. And so it can be very easy to just get sucked into this like doing mode rather than a being mode. And it came clear to me, I don't even know when, that like, it's always just Thursday. And it'll be just Thursday, whether I'm in New York City, on YouTube with somebody, or whether I'm directing a TV show, or whether I release 10 books, or whether I'm cleaning houses like I used to do. Like it's always just going to be a Thursday. There is no destination. How am I enjoying? How am I experiencing this river ride that I'm on right now with my little boat? That is life. And all the great teachers talk about that it's about presence. It's about this is what's real right now. There is no place to get to because this is it. And how can I celebrate? How can I be happy? How can I be fulfilled, loving to other people, present right now? And that's a perpetual practice. That really is my spiritual practice, is to like keep coming back to right now. Everything is perfect in its imperfection. It's all, we're in an ellipse around the sun. Nothing is perfect. Chaos is part. There's this balance between, again, for me, the balance between chaos and structure. And they're both needed. If you have too much chaos, everything falls into garbage. And if you have too much structure, it's too rigid and there's no creation and no new things happening, right? And no evolution. And so there's this perfect balance, although it's hard for us to see a lot of times. And certainly the cultural narrative that we live in right now doesn't respect that wisdom, but it is true within our own self. And so, and moving more and more into innocence, giving less fucks what anybody thinks. I mean, this is some of the gifts also of moving into the third phase of my life, right? You know, I really say, I say this all the time. I look forward truly to 60 to 80 being the most productive, most enjoyable time of my life. I'll be 60 in a couple months. And so, yeah, and I'm killing it. I'm on fire. It's like so fun, you know? So, moving in navigating chaos is like surfing. Yeah.
That's
Awesome.
beautiful. I totally love how my first dive into your gene keys and just like interpreting, going through the activation sequence, going through the pearl sequence, how natural it is to just show up in someone's life. You know, like you obviously been contemplating your gene keys a little bit, but actually you did say that you had not yet dove into your pearl sequence. And I was like, this, and this. And you're like, yes, you're naturally living it. So this is what I love about the gene keys is that there's nothing to figure out because it's already happening and you just didn't realize that it was already happening. And so having that awareness, it just gets to be validation. You know, like there's so many examples today in our conversation where I was like, this is how this is going to show up. And you're like, yes, yes, yes. And therefore you're validated and simply being yourself and simply living your life and knowing, okay, this is the impact that I make for people. It's right there. The evidence is right there. And that's what I love is that I love that this is evidence which the brain needs from like a scientific, like logical perspective, but the evidence is so spiritual. Like it's such a beautiful contrast that I'm obsessed with it, right? So it was such a joy to dive into your gene keys, and I love how open you were and vulnerable you were, and you gave such amazing examples of how they show up in your life.
Such a fun thing. So what can you offer up people at home?
Yeah, so in the show notes of our conversation today, you're going to find I have a freebies page. There's going to be a ton, there's like almost a dozen downloads for free that you can get about human design, gene keys, and business. If you are an entrepreneur and you want to look at how to embody the gene keys in your business, you should check out my Gene Keys business guide. That's an incredible tool. It's a very similar conversation to what we had today, where I brought in the gene keys and business so that it's tangible and you can actually see it play out in your life. And of course, you can find me on Instagram at Kehla G or my website, kehlaG.com. And I have lots of resources in there. And if you're somebody who is building a signature program, you're building your business, you can check out my signature program by design program, where I work with entrepreneurs in human design and gene keys to create a business structure that works for them. So thank you for having me on and having this conversation. It was so easy. It was so fun. Like we went out into the ethers, we came back in. Like I just feel very lit up right now.
Really great. I love the work you're doing in the world, and I love that we can offer this to the viewers. And Kehla, blessings on what you bring into the world. And thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.
And like and subscribe.